for coming, everyone. My name's Mary. This is the second to last World Wednesday of the summer, and I still have tons of spots for next week. It's another like do-along craft project, and it is going to be with a guest, and we'll be making a like movable, slidable pop-up card for the Shishi Festival. I'm hoping I said that right. And my guest's name is Ying. She also goes by Emma. So if you would like to do that program, I still have tons of spots. So go ahead and register yourself after this, and pickup has already started. But thank you so much for coming to this program today. I'm really excited about teaching embroidery. It's one of my hobbies that I do like almost every day after work. When I'm watching TV, I like to embroider. So this is like maybe the third or fourth class that I've taught at the library to do embroidery. So I didn't really prepare a whole lot for this because I've done it before. But we are going to learn a couple different stitches, and we're going to learn a little bit about Kasuti Embroidery. So the way it's going to work is I have a camera on my desk, and I'm going to show you through the camera. It's like a kind of a, I don't know what the word is for it, but it's a camera that shows down. And I'll show you how to thread a needle, how to tie a knot. We'll do some stitching, kind of just to get the idea how you can complete this project. And you are not going to complete this project in the hour that we're here today. It's something that you're going to have to keep on working on afterwards. But I am going to, at the end of this hour, show you what to do with your embroidery when you finish, because you are going to have to do a couple things just to kind of keep it in its frame. So I'm hoping we'll have time to do that. I have done some pre-stitching on mine, as you can see. So I'm going to try to finish mine while we're doing the class today, and that way it'll be ready to finish off. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen right now. So I just made a really quick little PowerPoint, basically with some pictures, just to show you some more examples of the Kasuti embroidery. So what I did for this pattern that you got in your kit, I found there was actually a website. It's called the Spruce, and they do craft tutorials. It's free for everybody, but they had a pattern that I took some of the motifs from and made up my own pattern. So I'll explain that a little bit more. But I wanted to really quickly just go through the back page if you want to follow along, where we talk a little bit about the type of embroidery, and then we'll kind of jump into the whole stitching process. So Kasuti is a traditional form of folk embroidery practiced in the state of Karnataka, India. And I don't know, I'm not very good at pronouncing some of these words, but it's a very intricate type of embroidery that involves putting up to 5,000 stitches by hand. Is traditionally made on dresswear like saris, Raviki and Angie or Kurta. So on this first slide, you can kind of see, I have a close-up of some of the stitch work, but then you can see on that right side, that like pink top, what it would look like if you put it on clothing. So with any kind of hand embroidery, you can hand stitch something on your clothes. A lot of people will stitch on like denim jackets. I've seen people stitch t-shirts like in their pockets. There's all kinds of ways that you can apply your own hand embroidery to clothing. I've seen people stitch shoes, backpacks, all kinds of things. So that's probably the most common use of this kind of stitching, but it doesn't have to be on clothing. You could put it on dish towels, or it could just be something where you're, hanging up on the wall, which is what we'll do with our projects today. So I kind of just wanted to go through some of these pictures. Maybe, can I switch? Why is it not going? There we go. Okay, so I tried to find a lot of variety of different kinds of stitches. So you can see it's done on different kinds of fabric. The white fabric, I'm looking at the picture on the left side, that's on like a woven type of fabric. It's not quite Aida cloth, which is the kind of material that you would traditionally do like cross stitch on. But it has that woven thing, and that's because the stitches are like, it's basically counted. Like you could do this without a pattern. We have a pattern today, but you could just count it on that because there's like little squares that are kind of built into that fabric. So let's see. I thought this picture of the mask was really cool. I have seen, you know, over the last year and a half, I have seen a lot of people do stitch work on their masks. But the important thing to remember about if you do hand embroidery on your masks is that you're putting like hundreds and hundreds of holes into the fabric. Do you think that the fabric would work very well as a mask if you'd had put hundreds and hundreds of holes in it? No, it probably isn't the best. So a lot of people who make that would do like the stitch work, and then after that they would use a sewing machine to like double layer the fabric and turn it into a mask. So I thought that was kind of cool. On that top left picture, do you guys see any like animals or anything? Anybody? You can unmute if you want or type it in the chat.
Birds.
What do you see?
Birds.
Birds. Yeah, I thought like with the feathers coming out the back, I think of peacocks. And I know that's often a motif found in let's see. Oh, the chat is elephants. Yes, definitely. So that's, oh man. So that's definitely a motif that comes up a lot. A lot of what you're just going to see is like in that top middle one, it looks kind of like a star. So that's like based on a lotus flower. So that's very similar to the pattern that we're going to make today.
We just spotted gazelles.
You just thought of gazelles?
There's gazelles in that one with the peacocks.
Oh, at the bottom? Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. You can see their like their antlers that are kind of have that zigzag pattern. So that works really well with the different kinds of stitches that you would do in this type of embroidery. Oops, I went backwards. Okay, so I found another, I was just looking for pictures online this morning for this. So somebody mentioned elephants. So here is a picture of an elephant motif. That's really cool. A lot of times you'll see only one color. So like a color block, like at the top picture of this. So just white or just like I'm doing a lot of red in mine. Or like the one on the bottom, you'll see lots of multiple colors that are kind of adding to the different motifs. So here you see like a beautiful sari, a beautiful dress, and it has tons of Kasuti embroidery work in that. So if that was made by hand, that's probably like thousands of hours worth of work because it's so much fabric and so many stitches. So I found a picture with another piece of clothing with a lot of Kasuti embroidery work into it. And you can kind of see the only two colors they used was yellow and red. And then, of course, the fabric was also red, and you see a little bit of white in there and then some navy. So really kind of keeping it simple with the color scheme. So I mentioned the Aida cloth. The two on the top left and top right, those were made on Aida cloth. So if you're doing cross stitch, then you know exactly, like it's mostly counting, and that's how you're able to make the pattern. So there's definitely a way that you could make this without a pattern. And I also like the one on the bottom right, the little themes on the outside, like the motifs, they look kind of like suns to me, or flowers. I thought those were really pretty. And I didn't really include that in our pattern, but I think, let me look.
Miss Mary, how are you spelling? Are you saying Aida cloth?
Yeah, Aida cloth. I think it's spelled A-I-D-A.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So if you look on the page, or the packet that I gave you, on the second page where it says getting started preparing your pattern. So that was one of the, I'm trying to So one of them was, let's see if I can find it. That little, I don't know, it's not like zooming in very well on my screen, but there was a little like flower thing that was really cute, I thought. So some more imagery going on in here. What do you guys see in the top left photo? What do you see a picture of?
I see parrots.
Yeah, me too. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. I love the parrots. And it's such a simple little design, but you can definitely tell it's parrots because it has the long tails, the long tail feathers, and they're green. And then I thought this picture on the right top, that's where you can see someone had it in a hoop. Usually when people make embroidery or cross stitch, they put it in a circle embroidery hoop. And that's just because then you can keep the tension all the way around it. And it's so much easier to stitch on a piece of fabric when it's really tight instead of if it was like loose. Like if you tried to pull up your shirt and do embroidery on the shirt that you were wearing, it wouldn't be very easy. What do you guys see in that bottom left picture? I thought this one was kind of open up for interpretation.
I think I see a ship.
Yeah, a ship. Any other ideas?
It's a peacock, I think.
You think
Bird.
a peacock? I could see that.
Peacock.
I kind of saw like a dragon going on.
See that?
Said a peacock. Yeah. So anyways, as you can see in that picture too, just two colors. Really simple. Definitely the like beauty is in the detail of the stitches. So I found some other like interesting looking motifs online. I'm almost done with this part of it. So I found this really cool, it was kind of like an infographic online. And it talks a little bit about the history of it, the different motifs. So we said the motifs are inspired from religion, architecture, flora, fauna, and objects of daily use, such as stars, lotus, tiger's claw, and peacock. So definitely that peacock is coming in, and I zoomed in on this page so you can kind of see it better. And then I also wanted to let you know about the 4 kinds of stitches. I mentioned that in the packet, but there's 4 kinds of stitches used in Kasuti embroidery. Murgi, which is like the zigzag, and I made sure to include a little bit of that murgi at the bottom of our pattern that we have. The Gavanthi, which is just a double running stitch, which is a really useful stitch if you're kind of an experienced embroiderer, because you can, instead of going down and up, if you're really good, you can just go like skim the top of your embroidery fabric. But we're not going to do that today just because it is a little bit harder. So then the Menthi is the cross stitch. And we're going to be doing a lot of that today. And then the Negi is the simple running stitch. So that's if you were just going to do like one line one way. So, okay. So I'm going to exit out of my PowerPoint. Actually, let's go over here and stop share. Okay. So now I can see you all again. So I am going to kind of really quickly explain how, if you wanted to make your own embroidery project, what you would need and how I did it, but I don't want to spend too much time on this. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to the other type of camera that I have. And I'm going to make, let's see, I can figure out spotlight. Okay. So now if you have your Zoom thing in speaker view instead of gallery, then you should be able to see my screen really well. So this is my pattern, and like I said, I'm kind of doing a little bit of stitching ahead just so I can hopefully finish. So I really wanted to quickly talk through kind of this packet that you guys all had. So some of the tools that you need are already included in the kit. Everyone should have a couple different colors of thread. And if you have other thread at home that you want to use instead because you didn't like the colors you got, that is totally fine. You are more than welcome to switch out the thread. You just needed to provide a pair of scissors for me. So I have just regular scissors that I keep at my desk. If you really get into embroidery, another tool that you might want to invest is like some tiny scissors. These are my embroidery scissors, and that way it's just a little bit less clumsy when you're like constantly picking up a pair of scissors to do to cut some thread when they're a little bit tiny. These ones are not very sharp anymore though, so it's easier when it's sharp. You will need a needle, which everyone should have gotten a needle on their on the outside of their embroidery hoop in their kit. And always put your, when you're not working with your needle, always put it on the outside of your hoop, because if you put it inside the hoop somewhere, then you're going to put little holes in there that you don't want. And if you just set it down on the table or on your couch, you're going to lose it and someone is going to step on it or sit on it, and it does not feel good to put your body accidentally on a needle. So I always put my needle on the outside right here, and I tried to pick out needles. I can show you. I usually buy my needles in these little hand needle kits, and that way there's like all kinds of different sizes in here. So I tried to pick out medium-sized needles for you all, with, because if they're too big, then it's hard to pull through the fabric. And if it's too small, then it's really hard to thread your needle. So I tried to give everybody like medium-sized needles for that. And lastly, when we're done, you'll need this tacky glue. So everyone should have gotten a tacky glue in their kit. Super useful. So what I did ahead of time for you is I used what's called a light tracing board and I'm gonna like pull up my camera so you can just kind of see it a little bit. So this is what it looks like. We have one that we keep upstairs in the, oh, someone's calling me. Okay, they're gonna have to leave a voicemail. We keep one in the digital media lab. It's called a light tracing board. You can get it on Amazon. It's like $20. So what you do is it lights up, as you can see, and then you can put a fabric on top, and you can kind of see through the camera, through the fabric. And then I used a special, let's see if I have one near me. I have one in my embroidery bag. So a special pen called Frixon, let me move that and actually turn that off. So this is called the Frixon pen, and it's like a heat activated pen. So the way that works is that when we're all done with the project, we're going to heat up the fabric and the pen lines are going to disappear. So underneath your stitches, there'll still be pen lines, but you don't need those after you finish doing all the stitching. So we'll heat it up and those will go away. So I'll show you how to do that at the end. So basically I took a piece of fabric and I traced it for you. I guess it would go like that. So that's how I got the pattern onto the fabric. And I always like to use 2 pieces of fabric when I put it in the hoop, and that just makes it a little bit more sturdy. It's going to stay in the hoop tighter, and then you won't be able to see it through. Like when you put it up on your wall, it's going to look a lot nicer because if it's one piece of fabric, you might be able to like kind of see through it, and you don't want that. So basically that's how I got you your pattern that you have. We did that prep work for you. So, and like I said a couple minutes ago, I found the motifs on the spruce, and this is what all the different ones that you could choose from. So I just used my computer and I kind of picked my favorite ones. So I picked a couple and made up our own little motif. So as you saw in the pictures, the Kasuti Embroidery has a lot of the same motifs that show up all the time. So yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. So go ahead and choose one of the colors that you want to start with. and pick up that thread. So my thread's on a bobbin because I take the time to put, this is called a bobbin. I do a lot of embroidery. This was actually my mom had a huge collection of embroidery. So this is like, I can see her handwriting on here. So if you do a lot of embroidery, it's helpful to have it on a bobbin, and that way you can put it back on there when you're not using it. But you guys just have a whole skein of thread. So go ahead and I'm going to switch over back over here. So go ahead and pull about an arm's length of, not huge, because if it gets too long, it's kind of hard to work with. But like about a width, about maybe like 1.5 feet apart like this. And then go ahead and cut it. And a lot of people think that when you do embroidery, you use this whole piece of thread. We're not going to use the whole piece. We are, oh, sorry for that person that was in the waiting room. So we're just going to use, so there's 6 strands. I'm going to switch back over to this camera. Is that important? Okay. So there's 6 strands in your thread. And we're going to pull 2 of them off. So the way that you're doing that is you're going to go to one end and you're going to find 2 strands and you're going to separate them from the other 4. And then you're just going to pull really nice and slow until the 2 come off. Okay, so now with my purple thread, I have only 2 strands of that 6 total thread. Okay, and we're gonna do, if you want to, you can do 3 strands too, but I think for most projects I usually do 2 strands. It's a nice thin, it's very clean lines, you can see that way. So with the strands with the 2, you're gonna tie a knot, and it's just a simple knot. So of course you're going to make a little loop and then you're going to put the end through it. So I made a knot, and I'm going to tell you a secret. Sometimes I pull too hard and I pull my knot through my thread. So I'm going to do a second knot just to make that knot a little bit bigger, because sometimes I'm an aggressive stitcher. So now my knot's a little bit bigger. Okay, now we are ready for the hard part. How's everybody doing so far? Okay. So you have a 2 strand piece of thread with a knot at the end. On the other end is a really frayed edge. If your edge is like mine and it's all frayed, go ahead and just cut the edge again. Oh, there we go. Now it's nice and neat. So you're gonna take your needle, and it's gross, but you're gonna stick your 2 threads in your mouth. And you're gonna get that edge wet. And then very carefully, you're going to try to force that through the eye of the needle, which is the top part with the hole. So I do a lot of embroidery, like I said, so it's pretty easy for me. It might take you a few tries and a lot of patience, but you should be able to get it. A little tip, if you have like some chapstick or like any like lip balm or something, if you put that on your lips, I'm gonna put some on my lips. I'll use my Cordy balm. Then it kind of acts as like a little bit of like a wax. It kind of waxes the edge of it too, and that helps. Okay, so just to kind of get us all on the same page, we have 2 strands of embroidery thread. We have a knot on one end, and on the other end, we have threaded our needle. So you're gonna have a tail over here, and you want to pull it. So it's about half the length of your total thing. So it's going to be pretty long. As we stitch, we're going to want it to get a little bit shorter. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a spot to start. We're going to instead, okay, I think I mentioned this in the packet. If you go to the part that says, let's stitch on here, I mentioned that in traditional Kasuti embroidery, it's designed to look the same on the front of your work and the back of your work. So far, does mine look like the same? No, not at all. That's because you would have to do some kind of difficult stitching where instead of like, I think I mentioned this, instead of like jabbing it and then coming back up, you would like go across the top of the fabric, and it's kind of tricky, like you would do something like that. So we are, if you are an experienced stitcher and you want to learn this specific type, there are a lot of like YouTube videos you can do. I'm going to teach you the basic stitch called backstitch, and we're going to be able to do this whole embroidery with this one stitch called backstitch, okay? So the reason why it's called backstitch, it's kind of counterintuitive, but you're actually gonna kind of move, you're gonna poke a hole, go up, and then you're gonna go, if you were going in a straight line, you would like go backwards. But since we're basically just gonna be doing a stitch like one, like, okay, I'm gonna start right here. That's gonna be like one stitch. This is really nice that it's kind of prescribed already. So go ahead and pick a spot to start. It really doesn't matter because we're all gonna try to finish all of these stitches. So go ahead and poke from the back of your embroidery. You're gonna poke up and pull all the way. So you're gonna pull all the way until your thread can't go anymore. And remember how I said you want that tail to be kind of short? Make sure that you can see that tail, because if you can't see that tail, then it's stuck behind your fabric. So I pulled all the way up, and then I'm going to pick another spot to go down. So you could either go up, and I'm hoping you can see this okay. So you could either go down here, or I could go this way. I'm going to make my short stitch first. So I'm going to go down, and I'm going to pull down. You guys see how I did a stitch there? Okay, so now we're ready to do another stitch. So the reason why it's called the back stitch is because, so my stitch just went down through this bottom hole right here. I can't come back up through that bottom hole and do the next stitch, because if I did that, look, I just pulled my stitch away. So it's called the back stitch because we're going to start from our next stitch and go backwards. So I'm going to redo my stitch that I just pulled up. And then this is the next stitch I want to make right here. So I'm going to go to the far end of it at the back of my hoop, and I'm going to poke my needle up all the way and pull until you can't pull anymore. Then I'm going to go back to that hole that I just came in. So that's why it's called the back stitch. So let's go ahead and poke down there. So now you've made 2 stitches. So now I get to choose where I want to go next. So remember, with that back stitch, you can't come back up the hole that you just came out of. So I'm going to start on a different side. So I'm going to show you a little shortcut with this. So in some places, you're going to do 1 stitch. So like on the bottom of this little motif, instead of going from here to here, that would be like the same length as the other 2 stitches I made. Since this is just a straight line, to make it go a little bit quicker, we're going to do it 1 really long stitch. That's actually called a straight stitch. And it's going to make our pattern look really smooth. So so I just came up through this hole right here, and I want to make this line right here. So I'm going to go down and pull. So do you guys see how I am kind of making, a lot of these lines are a little bit longer. You can do that through the whole pattern if you want. Okay, so I just came down through this hole right here, so I can't go up it. So I'm going to choose a new line to go, or a new spot to go up. So I'm just going to go to the right of it. And then I'm going to go back to that stitch that I just went in. Okay. And I'm going to choose a new starting point. So I need to make a stitch here. So I'm going to go up, pull all the way, and I want to complete this little diamond. So I'm going to go back to this hole once again and pull down. Okay, so I can't go back up here, and I'm already done with that stitch anyway. So I'm going to go back to that hole that I just was in, And I'm going to do another long straight stitch where I go all the way across to this point right here. Can you guys see this okay? So I am basically, it's like you are just gonna fall, it's like you're tracing with your thread basically. So you're gonna start a new hole up here, and then I'm gonna go down that hole back to where that stitch that I just came out of. I'm gonna poke down. Okay, and I'm gonna go pop over here now. You kind of see where I'm popping out. And I'm gonna go back up here. Okay, and now I am ready to do another like long stitch, but I just came into this hole, so I can't go back up and go down over here. So I'm gonna go to the other side of that long stitch and go back. So once again, that's why we call it the back stitch. So I'm gonna go to the, basically to the point where I wanna end up, and I'm gonna go back to the point where I originated. All right, and I'm going to do another long stitch on this side to complete that first little thing. So I'm going to go up right here, and I'm going to make a stitch straight down over here. And I'm almost done with like my first little set of those 4 diamonds. So basically, anytime it's a straight line, I give you permission, instead of like, I could do, if I wanted to make it harder on myself, I could do like 1 stitch here, and then I could do another back stitch here. And that way I completed that long straight line here. But I am lazy and I want to get this done quicker. So I'm going to make a straight stitch across. So why don't you guys ask me any questions that you have, or if you're having any difficulties, let me know now. And I'm going to keep on stitching until I run out of my thread. And then I'm going to show you what to do when you run out of thread. Okay. So, yeah, I probably should have put some music on or something. Otherwise, you're just going to kind of watch me stitch for a little while. And it looks like the few people that I can see stitching look like they're doing pretty good. I'll just let you guys focus. This is like a super relaxing pattern to stitch because the goal is just to like cover all of the pen lines basically. And it doesn't really matter how you get there. If we were doing traditional Kasuti embroidery, then it would be really important which lines you went down, which ways you went up, because you would be trying to get the same pattern on the front and the back. Oopsies. And then this is something that I do all the time. Don't get frustrated. But on the top part of your embroidery, there's a screw, and that's just so that you can keep making it tighter. But it's just annoying, and when your thread gets caught on it, it happens all the time. I'm not seeing any questions. Everyone's doing okay. Before we popped onto Zoom, was probably working on this for about an hour, maybe a little bit more. So I would imagine that it'll probably take you at least 2 hours to complete this with stitching. The good news is that we're doing the same stitch essentially the whole time, just this back stitch where we're just filling up the lines. So if you don't finish it today during the Zoom thing, you will have the tools you need to finish. So, and I was actually a little too optimistic that I was going to finish this in an hour, but we'll get there. I'm still going to show you in like 10 minutes how to finish your embroidery, and I'll probably just ask you guys to watch during that part. So I'm seeing a lot of like concentration, which is good. This is just like a really nice activity to do while you're watching TV and you don't really need to pay attention to what you're watching or listening to music. Or a lot of times I'll listen to audiobooks while I'm stitching. And since this pattern is so little, you're not going to use very much thread at all. So you'll have some thread left over. Oops, sorry, I went out of the screen there for a minute. If you want to do another project, all you need is some fabric, and you don't need to use the special pen. If you're just practicing, you could just use like a pencil or a regular pen and just go for it. So my favorite thing about embroidery is that if it's something you can draw, you can stitch it. You can turn anything into an embroidery if you draw it. And I will say that you might want to kind of keep an eye on the original drawing of the pattern that you have, just in case when I was tracing it, I made a mistake. If it doesn't make sense for some reason, maybe just check, because you can always, we're going to get rid of these pen lines. So you can always erase the pen lines, but once you make a stitch, then you'd have to like undo your stitch, which you can do. It's not too bad. And I'm almost done with this part, but I'm about to run out of thread. So if you have started, or if you've run out of thread, go ahead and pull the needle off of the thread. And if you are curious about how to do this, you can stop stitching for a second and just watch. And then you're gonna flip your embroidery over so that you can see the stitches that you've made. And here's the thread that I was just working with. And I want to obviously get rid of this little tail, because otherwise we just have like tails hanging out. So I'm gonna just do a knot. And the key with the knot at the back is that you want to make it really close to it. So make a knot, and then with your finger, you're going to try to push it down towards the fabric as close as you can. And just like when we started the needle, I like to make 2 just to be safe. And then you can snip that tail as close as you can without cutting the actual thread. So then you're just going to pick up that, like, remember we had that arm's length of thread that we had. You still have 2 more rounds of this because we're only using 2 at a time of the 6. So you're going to do that same thing again where you're going to pull 2 apart. And I'm going to show you a secret. If this happens, put the original thread in your mouth. I'm going to switch over to my camera so I can show you this little tip. Okay, so I'm starting to get a kind of a knot going on, and I don't want that. So this is kind of gross too, but put that piece in there. And then you're like separating all 3 from each other. So that's going to help you to prevent your thread from getting tangled. I do that like literally all the time. Okay, so now I have just the 2 strands. Oh no, someone was in the waiting room. Okay. I'm going to switch back over to my hand camera. Okay, so I set my needle on the table and I almost lost it, but I still have it, so it's okay. So remember, stick your needle in the fabric around the outside of your hoop. Okay, so I'm just going to do that little knot at the end of my thread. So we'll do 1 knot. And then we'll do 2 knots just to be safe. And then I'm going to go to the other end of the thread, stick it in my mouth. I have a really jagged edge, so I'm going to take my pair of scissors and I'm going to cut it down. I'm going to stick my thread through the eye of my needle first try, and I'm going to go ahead and finish that motif that I was working on. And I'm almost done with this. So I'm going to have to do another knot at the back, finish it off. And actually, I'm probably going to switch to my other color because I want to show you when you're making the actual the flower in the middle, the lotus, something that you can do to kind of speed it along. Okay, so I'm going to save that purple thread because I'm going to come back to it later, but I'm going to switch over, and actually I don't know where my red thread is. I think it was in my embroidery bag. So let me look around for a minute to find that. Okay, so here is the red thread that I was using. Of course, it's a mess, but I saved a couple strands, so I'm just going to use that. And they all got messed up, so I'm going to kind of re-thread them together. So 1 knot, 2 knot, come to the other end. Okay, so when you're doing the lotus flower, you're gonna do, I want to show you that back stitch if you were doing like a really long straight line, because remember I showed you on that top motif that if you do, like if you're trying to cut across 2, you can do a straight stitch, make it really long. So this line right here, like there's the lines that kind of start off the leg of the, I don't think I would do a straight stitch on that just because it's a little bit too long. So we're going to do a back stitch straight all the way to the end of that. So it's kind of confusing, but I'm going to start a little bit further away, and you can use the squares as like a guide kind of, because that's going to be about the length of 1 stitch. So I'm going to start away from my starting point, and then I'm going to go back to that starting point and pull down. And then I'm going to move a little bit further away. And it doesn't matter exactly how long you make your stitches, but you don't want to make them too long, because then you're not going to really have like a straight line. It's not going to look very great. Okay. All right. And then just like in that top thing, when you're making your star pattern, you can do a straight stitch to kind of cut across there. And you can do this however you want. If you want to make each little square at a time, you can. When I was stitching this, I sort of did like the horizontal lines all together at first. And then I would go back and do the vertical ones. Totally up to you. I kind of like that because then your hand is like doing a muscle motion, and it just like remembers it. So yes, I'm going to do another longer line, and I'm going to keep doing that back stitch. So I'm going to stitch for just a couple more minutes, and then I'm going to show you what you would do when you are ready to finish off your embroidery. Even though I'm not quite as done as I want to be, which is kind of a bummer. Literally, if I had 10 more minutes, I could finish this for you guys. Karen, would you be able to cover my desk for like 10 minutes? No, at 2 or at 3. I'm on the desk at 3. Okay. Okay. So I think this might run a little bit long. That way I can show you what you would do. So something I just want to let you guys know, if you are stitching and all of a sudden your tail is gone, the hanging thread, it probably got stitched in there. So if that happens, you're just going to want to snip one of those ends, because otherwise your 2 threads is going to become 4 threads, and it's going to be a lot thicker than the rest of them. So kind of be aware of that. I've done that before, and then I'm like, okay, why does that look so different? And then what I do is I basically just have to pick one of those and cut one of them, because who knows which one it was actually your tail. kind of just keeping an eye on the chat, but I'm also like super zoned in on my stitching, which you'll notice happens very easily when you're embroidering. You're just like going, going, going. So on this, like the lotus flower, I'm most of these stitches I'm doing 2 stitches long, just to kind of cut down my stitching, and it's going to make it look nice and clean. Seeing a lot of people really focused, so I'm hoping that means that you're enjoying it and it's relaxing, or at least it will be once you feel really good about what you're doing. And in that packet, I also have instructions for another stitch called star stitch. If you want around like the pattern, if you want to go freestyle and add like some little stars, you can. If you just feel like your embroidery needs a little bit extra, because I didn't want you to feel like you only learned 1 stitch. That's like super easy one. There's instructions on the packet for how to do that. Now I'm about ready to run out of thread. And hopefully I'm almost done with this red. Almost done with my lotus flower. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Everyone's doing okay. I haven't seen too many people dip off, so that's good. Like, this is definitely an older kids activity, I will say. Probably not even for the stitching part, but mostly for the threading of needles and tying knots. It can be kind of tough. I'm going to go ahead and use a little bit of this purple thread and finish off the mergay stitches at the bottom. And if you really hate doing the like threading the needle part, you can like at any craft store or even like Walmart or something, you can buy something called a needle threader, and it's like a little, and I have included those in kits before, because I know that threading needles can be kind of challenging, but I honestly think it's good to just keep practicing the threading the needle, and then it's not as hard anymore. So it's like, if you have a needle threader, great, but you're never gonna get really good at threading needles. And if this is something that you think is really fun, you might want to do a second project and then a third project. I already know that some of the people doing this World Wednesday have done some of my other embroidery classes, so hopefully that means that they like it. They like learning, they like practicing, and you're never gonna get better at something unless you practice it. So this is a really good way to kind of figure out what you like. And if you start stitching when you're a kid, by the time you're my age, you could like be a master sewer or a master embroiderist. Embroidery artist is probably what the official term is for it. But, and if you're really interested in this, you can look on Instagram, and there's like a million people on Instagram who share their embroidery work, and it's just so fun to see all of the different designs that people do. I'm almost done with my purple work. I decided to do the lotus flower in red, and then all the other motifs in the other color that I got, and I got purple. But you are welcome, if you have other threads at home, to do, you can make your lotus flower 2 colors, or you can make each of these motifs a different color. It's totally up to you. if we were doing this program in person, I probably wouldn't even be talking this much. I would probably be just like put on some music and let people embroider. If they have questions, they can raise their hand and ask me. So I just finished this little border thing down here. So these two borders, if you were going to stitch this onto like a dress or something, you would put this like on the cuff of it, since they work really well as borders. So I'm all done with my purple. So I'm going to take my needle off, and remember how I said you want, when you tie a knot, I have a lot of extra thread left, so it's going to be a little bit more challenging, but I'm going to push the knot down flush against the fabric on my table. I'm going to do a second knot, and then I'm going to cut that. Okay, so I need a little bit more red. I have barely any stitching left to do, but I'm going to cut a little bit more red, and I'm going to finish mine, and then I can show you kind of the process to wrap up your project. So I'll probably have y'all pay attention to me while I'm doing that, but I have about 5 more minutes of stitching, maybe less. Okay, I'm gonna thread my needle. There we go. And then it's kind of like hard to decide where you want to start when you kind of get interrupted. It's very therapeutic, I will say. Oops. So my needle, or my knot, was still too small. So I'm gonna make a third one, because for some reason that just like whipped right through the fabric. Start somewhere else, maybe. Start through. I've also noticed when I stitch stuff like this, where you're just making straight lines, your needle or your thread lines are going to be a lot straighter than your drawing lines. Because like I'm looking at some of these drawing lines and I'm like, these are not straight. But since we're doing the back stitch, it's really a nice stitch to get a nice straight line, because you're coming back to your starting point and you're making like a perfectly straight line with some string, which is really nice. Right. Almost done with this part. I should have done a little bit more pre-stitching, and that way it would be quicker for me to show you how to finish the project. So that's really the important part for you to know after this program, because you can stitch all day without me. Okay, so I am going to do another knot to finish this thread, and then I'll hopefully be done with just use one more piece, and I'll be able to wrap up this project. Are you guys having any trouble with the knot tying part? It's always, oh. Okay. So one more time, I'm going to pull the 2 strands away. And that one didn't tangle too much. If you keep your thread short, it's a lot easier to separate it. But if you keep your thread short, then you have to get a new piece of thread a lot more often, which kind of slows you down. So there's a happy medium between the lengths. I'm going to go ahead. If you are, so in the packet, I explained a couple ways that you can finish this project, but the main thing that you need to know is that we're going to use heat to get rid of the pen lines. And you want to get rid of those pen lines just because it's going to make your project look like so clean and nice. So you can either use hot water, and if you use hot water, it's going to have to be really hot water, and you're going to run it under hot water for like a couple minutes until you soak every single piece of it. And then you're just going to lie it flat on a cloth on the counter and let it dry overnight. And then it should be good to go the next day for the finishing. Or if you want to like speed that process up and you want to apply some heat, you can have an adult help you use an iron. So just for time's sake, that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. And I am going to get my iron heated up. It takes like a full, you know, like probably 1 minute, not even, to heat up an iron, but I'm so close to being done. I'm going to plug it in. And get that ready to go. Okay. So that should be heating up. And I'm going to finish my last couple stitches that I got here. I can see a lot of pen lines on mine, so I am like super looking forward to just getting rid of those. It'll look so much nicer. And then we are going to use that tacky glue to glue the fabric to our wooden hoop permanently. And that way you can enjoy it for the rest of your life as it hangs on your wall, or maybe you want to give it away to somebody. It's totally up to you. I can smell my iron heating up. Okay, and I got my tail caught. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to do one more knot. And if you're like really concerned about how the back of your embroidery looks, if you see any like tails that you don't like, you can cut those really short. That makes it look a little bit nicer. I might do that. Okay, so if you are stitching away right now, I'm going to have you take a little break because you'll have time after this program, and I want you to look back at my screen. So my iron is all heated up. This is really, really hot. So don't touch the iron part, but just for a couple seconds, you're just going to run the iron over the top of your stitches. And I don't know if you can see this on the screen, but magically all of those pen marks are gone. It's really cool. So my fabric is like pretty warm to the touch, but all of those pen lines are gone. And that's going to also be nice to like just kind of smooth your fabric out. Okay, so I have nice clean lines on my embroidery. So I'm going to flip it over, and this is probably the like most like confusing part. So there's two pieces of fabric here. So we're going to cut the bottom piece, the one that's closest to you, as short as we can all the way around the hoop. And that's just going to make it a lot cleaner and a lot neater when we're ready to, because basically what we're going to do is we're going to wrap the fabric around the hoop, and we're going to use that tacky glue to glue it on there, and it's going to look really nice and neat. But right now I'm just cutting and getting rid of all that extra fabric because we don't need any of it, because we're going to glue the top layer, or well, technically right now the bottom layer, but when we're showing it, it's the top layer. So, and then the next part I'm going to cut is the remaining layer. And I want that layer to be about the size of my finger here. So that's about 1/2 inch. So I'm going to go around with my scissors, and I'm just going to cut, I'm kind of going off the frame here. Sorry, I'm going to cut around it about 1/2 inch. And this is just like one way to finish a hoop. There's lots of different ways. You can like Google it if you're, you know, want to try some other ways, but I like to do this. I've done like probably hundreds of embroidery projects in my life, and I like to do this because it just looks really clean. It's really quick, and it like is and I also like to show off the back of my hoop, because some people will put like a piece of fabric across the top of it so you can't see it anymore. But like this was work that I did, so I like to like kind of look back and see that. So with So I have my fabric little lining or my little border of it. So then you're going to take your tacky glue that was included in your kit. You're just going to snip the edge of it off. Make sure you don't lose the cap. The cap is so important because if you lose the cap and you don't put the cap back on when you're done, then that whole bottle is done because it dries really quickly. Okay, so with your glue, you're just going to make a nice little border of glue. I'm going to do it on the inside of my hoop and just like a nice little thin line of glue. It's not going to be a thin line for long. So I'll show you what we're going to do. Okay, so I got glue all the way around it. And then with my finger, I'm going to put my cap back on. Boom. With my finger, keep that extra fabric that you had nearby. I'm going to use my finger and I'm just going to smooth it so that it covers like basically all of the inside border of that wood. I don't know how well you can see what I'm doing, but I'm just like smoothing it with my finger. I put a little bit too much extra glue on this part, so I'm going to wipe that away too. And if you want to, you can use the fabric, the extra fabric to kind of wipe away any extra glue. But basically, I like spread out a thin layer of the glue around the wood part of the hoop. And then I'm going to, with both of my hands, I'm going to start wrapping around and I'm going to press with my thumbs, press that fabric onto the hoop. And it's not going to stick very well right away. This is called tacky glue because as it dries, it starts to get really tacky, really sticky. So the first try, it might not stick very well, but we're going to go around the hoop twice. And that way, the second time when it's starting to dry a little bit and it's getting really, really tacky. And actually, I probably wiped away too much glue. That's okay. We'll see. And I actually think this is like a very fun part of the process, gluing my fabric onto my hoop. All right, so now I'm going around for the second time and it's a lot more sticky this time around. So it's like sticking a lot better. And you're just going to kind of keep smoothing it so that it looks really clean. I'm going to put a little bit more glue just on this one part. Okay, and then I'm going to spread that around again. Keep on going around. It's hard to teach something like this in an hour. So it's going to be on you guys to finish it and do this all on your own. All right, I've gone around twice around my hoop. There's a few parts that's still sticking up, so I'm just going to push down and hold a little bit. But other than that, this is pretty much your finished product. Oop, wipe that away. And then it's ready to hang up. So good job. If you if you want the top of your hoop to be like at a different part of your flower, you can always take it out of the fabric and just like transfer the top part. This is like the top part to, you know, like if you wanted to put it over here, or maybe you want these two little stars to be up like that, you can certainly do that. But yeah, that's how you finish it. Make sure you put your glue on there. You can throw away that extra fabric. Save your needle, save your extra thread for your next project. So yeah, I'm all done. That's everything that you need to know. Does anyone have any questions before we sign off? Does anyone want to show off their, I'm going to switch it over to my other camera, and I'll switch it to gallery view. Does anybody want to show off what they have so far? No? That's okay. Okay, well, I'm just gonna say thank you for coming. And if you have any embroidery questions, let me know. I'm at the library. You have my email address, and I hope that you enjoyed making your embroidery project. Thanks a lot.